Now we'll have a look at how to create some 3D text and lights. For that, I want this room to be a little bit deeper actually, so I'm going to select my floor and I'll press Command-Shift-Y. I'll change its height, so it's this part here, to be a bit taller. So I'm just going to go maybe set this to be, let's say, 4000. And to compensate for that, I need to change the width of the walls here. So I'm going to go select the wall and then do Command-Shift-Y and then change the width to 4000 as well. And then do the same for this wall as well. Command-Shift-Y, and the width is going to be set to 4000 as well. And finally, I'm going to select the back wall by clicking somewhere near the base here, so it knows where to snap from. And I'll hold down Command, so it snaps to the back side of the floor. I'll now use my camera tools to zoom out. I'm just going to push up and then zoom out a little bit. And now I'm going to go ahead and create a text layer, and I can easily do this by double-clicking on the Type tool here. That puts a flashing beam in the center. And if I just go and type in, let's say, Digidemi, you'll notice that the text is actually being created. So if you look down here, it says Digidemi, but you don't see the text here. That's because the text is 2D by default, so I need to convert this into a 3D layer as well. Now I can see the text. And if I now make this text a little bit larger, so if I select my character, and then go to the font size here, maybe make this a bit larger, like that, I can then push this towards the back of the room using the Z arrow here. As you drag, if it's going a little bit too slow, like it is here, you can just hold down the Shift key and that will speed up the movement. And now that we have the text, let's go and create a simple animation on this. So I'm just going to zoom in first. And then bring this towards the center. And with the text layer selected, I'm actually going to go push this all the way up so it's easier to understand what's happening here. And I'm going to press the letter R to reveal rotation. I just want now this to rotate on the X. So I'm going to go to the X rotation. And then initially, I want this to be set to -90. So let me just go and type in -90. So it's flat on the floor. I'll then go and keyframe this, and then I'll go forward by about 10 frames and then set this to 0. And then right away we'll have this animation. And I'm going to select these keyframes so I can create an easy ease animation by pressing F9. And then I'll open up my graph and then zoom right into the graph by using plus. I'll then just go and click outside to deselect them all, then click just on X rotation. I'll just create a spike here to increase the influence. Like that. And I'm also going to create an overshoot. So I'm going to go to the value graph and I'll just go and click and drag this up a little bit. So it rotates towards us and it goes past the 0 degree point and then it goes back. So here we go. It's a little bit too fast, so I'm just going to go slow this down by dragging this towards right. That's looking better now. So if I play this again, that's looking better. Let me come out of the graph. And now what I'll do is to go ahead and create a light. So let me just go forward a little bit so I can see the text standing up. If I go to the layer here at the top and then go to new, I can create a light. And then it asks us what kind of light we want to create. Now, there are 4 different types you can use. The point light, the one I have selected here, is a light source that's very similar to a light bulb. So imagine a sphere that emits light in all directions. That's what a point light is. Where a spotlight is going to have a direction. So instead of emitting light in all directions, the spotlight will be facing a particular point. The ambient light is a light that you use to make the entire scene darker or brighter. So it's not like it's got a position or a direction, it's going to affect the entire scene. And the parallel light is very similar to the sunlight in real life. In the case of After Effects, the parallel light is going to be infinitely far away from the scene. So the only thing that's important is the rotation of the light. Not quite the position, but the rotation of the light. Now for now, I'm going to create a point light. With the point light selected, we can give it a color. We can change the intensity, so I'm going to leave these alone. And these two are grayed out, cone angle and cone feather, because they refer to the spotlight. If I go and create a spotlight, you see I can click and change these as well. For now, I'm going to stick with the point light, and I'll tell it to cast shadows. So I'll just go and turn this on, and then I'll press OK. Now that we have the light created, let me zoom out by using my camera tools. I can see the light here in the center of the scene. So if I now get my selection tool, I'll lift the light up. The higher this goes, the farther back it can reach. If I now increase the height a little more, you may notice that the light doesn't actually cast any shadows. Although we did tell it to cast shadows in the first place. Let's go and double check that. To open up the settings of the light, all you have to do is to go and double click on the light here. And you see that the same settings will pop up. And the cast shadows option is turned on indeed. Now, in order for you to cast shadows, you first need to turn the shadows option on in the light. And you also need to tell the layer to cast shadows as well. So in this case, we want the text to cast shadows. And we do that by first collapsing the text and then opening that up again. And right towards the bottom, it says Material Options. The Material Options refer to the 3D behavior of the layer. If I now go and turn this Cast Shadows option on as well, you'll now start seeing the shadows on the floor. Now, depending on where your light is, so if I select the light here, depending on where the light is or how high it is, the shadows will change appearance. If I drag this further down, you see you'll have longer shadows. As I drag this up, you'll have shorter shadows. Now, if I zoom in here a bit more, so if I just use my camera tools to zoom in, and then maybe orbit around a little bit, and then maybe push this to the side, and then push in, there, you'll notice that the shadow has no diffusion, so it's quite sharp. Now, if you go to the light settings by double-clicking again, down here where it says Shadow Darkness and Shadow Diffusion, you can control what the shadow will actually look like. If I go and reduce the shadow darkness, you see it's not as dark. Or if I increase the shadow diffusion, it's going to be blurry. The higher the diffusion, the blurrier it will be, but the slower the render times. So keep that in mind. So usually what I do is I set this to 0 initially, and I create everything I need to create, so it doesn't take too much time to do previews. But then before I do the final render, I increase this number to be whatever I want this to be. Then I render it. So as you work, you set the diffusion to 0, and just before you export, you increase this back up again. So let me do just that. And I'm going to push the shadow darkness to, let's say, 75. And I'll press OK. There we go. And now if I preview this, you'll see that the text is rotating up, and the shadows are following suit. You see at the very beginning though, the text is actually visible. Now that's actually something I want, but if you didn't want that, what you can do is to select the text layer, and then go to Transform, and then maybe push it down just a tiny bit so it's below the floor, and then you can animate that as well. And notice, when I'm changing this, it says Z next to my cursor, but as I update it, the Y is updating. Have a look. And that's because we've rotated the layer. So this arrow is what used to be Y, and this green one is what used to be Z. So if I move the green one, you'll see the Z will update here. If I move this one, the Y will update. If you want the arrows always to be colored green on the Y, blue on the Z, and red on the X, you can come up here and click on this button which says World Axis Mode as opposed to the Local Axis Mode. So if I change this to World Axis Mode here, you see that the Y arrow is always green, Z arrow is always blue, and the X arrow is always red.